In today's video, I'm going to be replacing the corroded front brake discs and the pads on my BMW Z3. It is a very hot summer's day today and the pollen count is really high. So if I sound really husky and my eyes make me look like an albino rabbit, you know why. Nevertheless, I'm going to turn my attention to the brakes on my Z3. The previous owner was very upfront about the state of the front brake discs on this car. In fact, he actually gave me a spare set. And as Ridex, or Ridex, however it's pronounced, is at the lower end of the price range on Autodoc, it's not a brand I would usually consider fitting, but as I've got them, I may as well. But as this car is going to get minimal usage, as it's primarily a content car, I don't think it's going to matter too much. To give them their best chance, I've bought a set of Bosch brake pads to go with them. And with the wheel off, we can take our first look at the brakes. Okay, I mean, I've seen worse, but they are quite corroded. They're probably going to be worse on the inner surface, as they often are. Pads aren't really worn out. Quite a few corroded suspension components, which isn't a massive shock on a car of this age. We'll get this wheel turned fully to the left to give us better access to this caliper and get the reservoir cap off to allow the brake fluid to rise when I push this piston in. I note that someone has painted these calipers red. That can't be standard, nor can that BMW. That looks like a sticker. How that withstands the heat from brakes, I'll never know. Everything's red, even bits that should be black. Get these Allen key bolts undone. These are 7mm Allen key bolts. God, they're not meant to be that tight. I hope I'm not pulling the thread out of this caliper carrier. I've had that before on a Golf. When you work with newer cars all the time, you take it for granted that stuff just comes undone. It's not until you work with something this ancient that you start coming up against the sort of problems that you just forgot all about. After all this time, these little gators can just turn kind of papery. We'll get that piston pushed back in and see how we do. Well, it's moving and that's reassuring. Yeah, that's all the way back. Just going to sit that caliper on an axle stand there so it's out the way and it's not putting too much strain on this old brake pipe here. And now we can focus on undoing these. These are 16mm. And they came undone way easier than I was expecting. That needs cleaning up thoroughly. And now we've got this 6mm Allen key that just secures the disc to the hub. If these are tight, you can stick a couple of wheel bolts in. Gives you something to lever against. You can alternatively, if you've got a helper at the start, loosen this while somebody puts their foot on the brake. I don't have that helper today. We've got some surfaces to clean up here. This hub carrier is actually quite crusty. It's good to pick these bits off because that way there's less chance of them ending up getting into your brakes and causing noises. I mean, this is a great big hunk of steel. It's very thick. I don't think this sort of corrosion is likely to impact on its structural integrity, but it's a good idea to clean it up the best we can. The back plate is in surprisingly good condition. I've seen these pretty much dissolve away on much newer cars. Next, I need to clean up this caliper carrier, get rid of all the corrosion and brake dust residue, so the new pads can slide freely and without impediment. Let's unbox one of these and see what we've got here. Okay, needs degreasing. Before I do that, let's just compare old with new. It's when you get to this stage that you really hope the parts that you've got are the ones you need. But they are the same. You can see the extent of the corrosion on the inner and outer of the inner surface here. They were pretty bad. Plenty of brake cleaner just to remove the wax or grease that are applied to protect them in transit, prevent them from corroding. The very same substance would play havoc with your brake linings if you didn't do this. It would impregnate the brake pads with oil and they probably never recover from that. Spray some copper grease around this. And just tighten that retaining bolt. The caliper carrier has been nicely cleaned up. It's time to get some copper grease onto that. Just applying a little bit of Loctite to these bolts. These are tightened to 110 Newton meters. That's the setting that I came up with. Obviously make sure you're happy with any setting that you decide to use. Here are the brake pads. There's part number there. And I'm now just going to check to see that these are correct. They look fine. We can now install this brake pad that slides nicely there now. No jamming against the carrier like the old one was. And now we can refit this brake pad into the piston. And refit the caliper. Just cleaning up these slider bolts. They are much better. Snip these up, don't need to go crazy with these. People often do. Pop the caps in, and not forgetting the clip. Now while we're here, it makes sense just to have a quick look round. That bush looks like it's starting to separate there at the back. That anti-roll bar drop link again is separating, that needs changing. There's a split on that lower ball joint rubber, but I'm going to change that whole lower arm anyway. This track rod end and track rod is crusty as hell. I think it's going to be in for some new track rods. That is not the correct fixing for that wheel speed sensor to that little threaded piece on the suspension strut there. It's meant to be a clip, I'll be getting that. Ferrules are a little bit corroded, but nothing sinister. I think I'm going to change these brake hoses anyway, just simply because of their age. Nothing leaking up here. the bump stops looking a bit sorry at the top there. Let's see what joys the other side will bring to us. To the other side now, and you will note that we've got a brake pad wear sensor on this side. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as the other side. That right there is the correct clip that should be on that stud, so now I know what it is, I can get one for the other side. Very tight again on this side. These have been removed successfully. There's even red paint on those. For the love of God. I'm just going to cut this wear sensor because I've got a new one. I can already see that that has had a new wheel speed sensor on this side. Another fairly rusty looking piston. I think this really needs new calipers at some point. Not really a fan of the red anyway. I definitely don't think I'm happy with the amount of crust, for want of a better word, around this piston. I'll be replacing both of these front calipers. Neither of them were seized though. As with the other side, the disc is fitted, having been degreased. The caliper carrier prepared to within an inch of its life. Copper slipped. Bolts have Loctite applied and torqued to 110 Newton meters. Once again, that's the torque setting that I researched. Always check your own torque settings and make sure you use one that you're happy with. The key difference on this near side front is that we have the wear sensor on the inner pad. This is the Bosch wear sensor that I got from Autodoc, along with the pads. And it really is just a case of it going in here, clipping in here, just like that. We slot the outer pad in just like we did the other side. And then we fit the inner pad into the caliper piston. And you will see this wear sensor wire comes out through here. And as with the other side, we clean up and apply special lubricant to these caliper sliders that secure the caliper itself to the carrier. Bolts refitted, pop the caps back in, and the retaining clip. To reconnect this wiring, we now need to follow the route of the old wiring. It goes in behind this cover here for the bleed nipple. It then passes through this clip here, which is where the wheel speed sensor also passes. It then takes a turn around the back and then goes through here. So remove the old one. Fit the new one. And it then goes up behind this cover, which we can open very easily, where we see the connector. Oh, the connector has disintegrated. Joys of an old car. It has finally come apart. It's just rather disappointing that that had to break up like that. The good news is it can still be refitted, but just not locked in the conventional sense. And that should be okay. It'll probably bug me, but I think that'll probably be fine. Now, this BMW sticker thing here, I could live with that if that was on straight, but it's not, so it's got to go. That was robust, wasn't it? That's better. I think we all know what the car is. I'll do the same on the other side. Before I get this wheel back on, very similar situation this side. We've got a bump stop that's looking very used. Shock absorbers dry. And then we've got a very crusty track rod here. Track rod end rather, that's a long track rod end. That drop link's had it. I think we'll be in for another lower arm as well. Might as well do the pair. Just a final glimpse before I get the wheel back on. That is all done. Wheels are torqued up to 120 Newton meters. Then last of all, it's really important not to forget this bit, pump the brake pedal. Otherwise you won't have any brakes when you pull away and go to stop. Pump it a few times and just check the brake fluid level is where it needs to be. Well, that is it for another video. Incredibly hot today, about 30 degrees, which may not sound hot to some people in some places, but for Britain that is hot, bloody hot. And I'm glad it's done. I'm going to take this car out for a drive now, obviously roof down, and see how it handles with its new brakes. Obviously, as you've seen, there's lots to do, lots of suspension parts, steering parts, and those brake calipers, I'll probably change those as well. So there's lots to do, but it doesn't have to be done by tea time. It's something that can be ongoing, and it's a journey. Hopefully one that's going to be interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.